The shimmer of my bioluminescent spots reflected off the quantum glass window as I watched the human transport ship dock at our prestigious academy. 300 years of maintaining the galaxy's highest educational standards, and here I stood, about to welcome what many consider to be walking disasters into our halls of excellence. The Council's insistence on integrating all newly discovered civilizations had finally caught up with us in the most absurd way possible. The ship's airlock hissed open, revealing our 3 new cadets, Mason Drake, Nova Chen, and Rex Thompson. The welcoming committee, 42 species represented by our finest faculty members, fell into an unprecedented silence. Even the whisper trees of Sigma 9, known for their constant telepathic murmuring, went quiet. Mason Drake stepped out first, his red hair blazing under our binary suns like some sort of cosmic warning signal. Standing at what humans would call 6'4", he moved with a predator's grace that made several of our more sensitive faculty members take involuntary steps backward. My third heart skipped a beat when I noticed he wasn't even breathing heavily in our 2.3 standard gravity. Nova Chen followed, her dark eyes scanning our gathering with an intensity that reminded me of a void hawk hunting quantum particles. She carried herself with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years mastering martial arts, yet there was something else, a barely contained energy that seemed to pulse beneath her calm exterior. Rex Thompson emerged last, and by all that's sacred in the 17 dimensions, he was grinning. Actually grinning, as if our galaxy-renowned institution was some sort of amusing diversion. I felt my spots shift to a deep purple of annoyance when I noticed he was casually tossing and catching what appeared to be an ancient Earth device called a yo-yo, while walking in gravity that should have made such actions nearly impossible. "Welcome to Centaur Prime," I managed, my vocal sacs vibrating in what I hoped was a proper approximation of their primitive sound-based language. "I am Professor Zalax, Senior Training Director of the Galactic Defense Academy." "Awesome place you got here, Prof." Thompson called out, still playing with his yo-yo. "Love what you've done with the quantum architecture. Is that a Klein bottle manifold supporting the artificial gravity field?" I felt my spots cycle through several colors of surprise. How had he even noticed the Klein bottle configuration? Most species required at least 2 years of advanced theoretical physics to even grasp the concept. "Indeed," I replied cautiously. "Though I hardly see how." "Oh man, you're using a modified Hawkingian field equation for the gravity manipulation, aren't you?" Nova interrupted, her eyes practically sparkling. "That's brilliant. The quantum fluctuation dampening must be incredibly efficient." My third heart was now definitely malfunctioning. These Death Worlders weren't supposed to understand our technology, let alone recognize its theoretical underpinnings at a glance. Mason Drake, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Professor, I couldn't help but notice your defense grid is running on a standard Heisenberg matrix calculation. Have you considered implementing a nonlinear quantum observer? It might reduce the processing load by about 47%. The whisper trees started murmuring again, but this time it wasn't their usual peaceful telepathic symphony. It was the equivalent of shocked gossip. That is. I struggled to maintain my professional composure. Perhaps we should proceed with the orientation briefing. As I led them toward the grand lecture hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. These humans weren't following any of our predicted behavioral patterns. They should have been struggling with the gravity, overwhelmed by the advanced technology, or at least showing some sign of intimidation. Instead, Thompson was now doing what he called walking the dog with his yo-yo, in 2.3 gravity, while explaining quantum string theory to a fascinated group of Medusan students floating behind us. The orientation briefing didn't help my growing sense of unease. I was halfway through explaining our century-old assessment protocols when Thompson raised his hand, that insufferable grin still plastered across his face. "Yes, Cadet Thompson?" I asked, my spots involuntarily flickering with annoyance. "So these tests," he said, lounging in a chair specifically designed to be uncomfortable for most species, "they're basically just advanced versions of human video games." I beg your pardon. I felt my auxiliary brain begin to throb. Yeah, you know, he continued, performing a complex sequence with his yo-yo that shouldn't have been possible under normal physics, let alone our enhanced gravity. The quantum physics simulations are like Quantum Quest 7, the tactical exercises are basically Space Commander Elite, and the psychic resistance training. That's just a hardcore version of Mind Maze 3000. Nova Chen nodded enthusiastically. The combat simulations in varying gravity conditions are definitely giving me strong force vibes. Love that game. These are highly sophisticated training protocols developed over thousands of years. I sputtered, my spots now cycling through colors so rapidly that several photosensitive students had to look away. Mason Drake leaned forward, his expression serious for the first time. Professor, we mean no disrespect. It's just that humans have been simulating these kinds of challenges in our entertainment for generations. We call them games, but they're really training programs designed to push our problem-solving abilities to the limit. I felt all three of my hearts sink as I realized what we had done. In our thorough analysis of human military capability, technology, and physical attributes, we had completely overlooked their entertainment industry. We had inadvertently accepted 3 cadets who had spent their entire lives preparing for our impossible training program through what they considered recreational activities. The rest of the orientation passed in a blur of increasingly disturbing revelations. Nova Chen casually mentioned that she had been playing with gravity manipulation apps since she was a child. Thompson demonstrated how their video games had trained them to think in 15 dimensions simultaneously. Drake explained how human, virtual reality, had prepared them for complex combat scenarios in varying gravitational conditions. As I recorded my personal log that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had made either the biggest mistake or the most brilliant decision in the Academy's history. Only time would tell which it would be. The first week of actual training with our human cadets has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about education, combat, and the nature of intelligence itself. My bioluminescent spots haven't returned to their normal color in days, stuck in a constant state of bewildered cyan. It started with the theoretical quantum physics examination. We traditionally begin with this to weed out those who aren't prepared for the rigors of our program. The test requires students to visualize and manipulate 15-dimensional spacetime constructs while solving complex mathematical equations. Most species require months just to grasp the basic concepts. The humans completed it in 6 hours. Oh man, this is just like that bonus level in Quantum Crush Saga. Thompson had exclaimed, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Remember that weird puzzle where you had to fold spacetime into a Mobius-Klein bottle to create a temporal paradox? Nova Chen, who was simultaneously solving 3 different quantum entanglement problems, merely nodded. The hit detection in that game was terrible though. This is much more precise. Mason Drake, meanwhile, had discovered what he called a speedrunning exploit in our testing system. He somehow managed to solve complex quantum equations by treating them as what he called physics engine glitches. See, if you approach the quantum foam barrier at exactly 47.3 degrees while maintaining a superposition state, he explained to a group of stunned faculty members, you can clip through the probability wave and skip the entire calculation process. It's basically the same technique we use to break the speedrunning record in Quantum Quest 7. I had to call an emergency faculty meeting that evening. The whisper trees were practically screaming in telepathic distress. They're treating our most advanced theoretical concepts like some sort of game. Professor Thull of the Advanced Physics Department waved all 7 of their appendages in agitation. Their crystalline form was vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter nearby glassware. Perhaps, suggested Dean Var9, their photonic brain pulsing thoughtfully, that is precisely why they're succeeding. They have no fear of failure because to them, failure just means trying again with a different approach. The next day's advanced xenobiology session proved even more disturbing. We had prepared our standard first-year challenge, identifying and cataloging 50 of the galaxy's most dangerous parasitic life forms. Thompson took one look at the specimens and started humming something he called the Pokemon theme song. "Gotta catch 'em all," he declared, proceeding to not only identify each specimen but also suggest improvements to their containment protocols based on what he called shiny hunting strategies. Nova Chen approached the task by creating what she termed a biological tier list, categorizing the specimens based on their threat levels and potential combat applications. "It's just like optimizing your party composition in Monster Collector X," she explained to her bewildered classmates. But it was the tactical simulations that truly broke us. We placed them in our most challenging scenario, defending a space station against a surprise attack by an overwhelming force. The simulation was designed to teach humility and the acceptance of no-win scenarios. The humans beat it in 20 minutes. "Classic tower defense setup," Mason Drake explained afterwards, while my spots flickered between disbelief and amazement. Once we recognized the attack patterns, it was just a matter of applying basic spawn camping strategies. The enemy AI was using pretty standard pathfinding algorithms, Nova added. "Anyone who's played Stellar Siege knows you can funnel them into choke points and exploit their targeting priorities." Plus, Thompson chimed in, still playing with that infernal yo-yo, "the resource management was way easier than Space Station Manager 3000. No crafting system at all." The faculty was in an uproar. The humans weren't just passing our tests, they were completely dismantling the philosophical foundations upon which they were built. Every challenge we presented was met with what they called gamer logic, a bizarre combination of lateral thinking, pattern recognition, and complete disregard for conventional wisdom. Then came the psychic resistance training. We had designed these exercises to gradually strengthen mental barriers over months of careful practice. The human approach was different. "It's basically just dealing with griefers and toxic players in chat," Thompson explained while effortlessly repelling a Class 5 psychic assault. "Once you've survived a Modern Warfare 2 lobby, no alien telepathy can faze you." Nova developed what she called a mental DPS rotation, cycling through different defensive techniques at precise intervals. "It's just like managing cooldowns in an MMO raid," she said, while simultaneously maintaining shields against 3 of our strongest psychic instructors. Mason Drake somehow turned the entire exercise into what he called a rhythm game, synchronizing his mental defenses to an internal beat. "If you time your blocks to the BPM of Through the Fire and Flames, nothing can touch you," he insisted. The breaking point came during what we call the impossible simulation, a combat scenario featuring randomly shifting gravity fields, quantum anomalies, and hostile environments. It's meant to be attempted after years of training. The humans asked to try it on their 3rd day. "All right team, standard speedrun strats," Mason announced as they entered the chamber. "Nova, you handle ad management. Rex, focus on gravity exploitation. I'll deal with boss mechanics." What followed was 45 minutes of pure chaos. They treated shifting gravity fields like jump pads, used quantum anomalies as fast travel points, and somehow turned the hostile environment effects into what they called buff zones. "Did you see that sick wave dash through the gravity well?" Thompson shouted while performing physically impossible maneuvers with his yo-yo. "Total frame perfect execution. Nice kiting on those quantum hostiles, Nova." Mason called back while somehow using overlapping gravity fields to fly. Classic MMO tank strategies. The DPS uptime is insane if you treat the radiation zones like dot fields. Nova added, moving through the chaos like a deadly dance. They not only completed the impossible simulation, they set a record that broke our scoring system. Literally broke it. The quantum computers calculating their performance rating experienced a buffer overflow and had to be rebooted. That evening, as I updated the training records, I realized we had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human learning. We had assumed our training program would teach them how to handle complex, multidimensional challenges. The truth was far more unsettling. their entertainment had already taught them everything they needed to know. Professor? Thompson's voice interrupted my contemplation. He was standing in my office doorway, still playing with that yo-yo. We were wondering, is there a way to increase the difficulty settings on these simulations? Maybe add some achievements or unlock criteria. I felt my spots shift to a shade of blue previously unknown to xenobiologists. Also, he grinned, have you considered implementing a battle pass system? I've never seen the faculty lounge in such disarray. The whisper trees have started stress-shedding their luminous leaves, Professor Thul's crystalline form has developed anxiety fractures, and Dean Varnina's photonic brain is cycling through emergency wavelengths I didn't even know existed. The cause of this unprecedented chaos? 3 human cadets who have turned our entire educational system on its head. We must adapt. I declared at our emergency faculty meeting, my spots pulsing with determination. If they approach our challenges like games, then we must create challenges that defy gaming logic. The results of our efforts were unexpected. First, we tried introducing complete randomness into our simulations. No patterns, no predictable spawns, no recognizable rules. Surely this would defeat their gamer logic. Oh sweet, it's a roguelike. Thompson exclaimed when faced with our chaos-based combat scenario. Check it out, procedurally generated encounters. This is just like Quantum Dungeon 4. Nova Chen immediately started documenting what she called seed patterns, while Mason Drake began experimenting with different builds to optimize for random encounters. Within hours, they had developed strategies for every possible variation our quantum computers could generate. The RNG in this is pretty decent, Thompson commented while casually avoiding death for the 15th time. But you might want to implement a pity timer for the rare drops. Next, we tried psychological warfare. We designed scenarios with no clear objectives, no feedback systems, and no apparent way to progress. The kind of existential challenges that usually leave students questioning their place in the universe. Hey, this is just like those indie art games. Nova brightened. You know, the ones that deconstruct the nature of gaming itself. Very meta. They proceeded to treat the philosophical void like something called an environmental narrative experience, finding meaning in the meaninglessness and turning our existential crisis simulator into what they termed a walking simulator with deep lore implications. Professor Urax of Applied Psychology had to take a mental health day after watching them speedrun nihilism. In desperation, we created what we called the anti-game, a training scenario specifically designed to punish every known gaming strategy. Pattern recognition would trigger hostile responses. Exploiting mechanics would cause system-wide failures. Even attempting to optimize performance would result in exponentially increasing difficulty. The humans loved it. This is literally just a getting over it type game. Thompson laughed while deliberately triggering every punishment mechanism we had programmed. The salt farming potential is amazing. Check out these frame-perfect death triggers, Mason called out while somehow turning our punishment systems into a complex movement technique. The speedrunning community is going to go nuts over this. Nova had already started documenting what she called challenge run strategies and discussing potential categories for tournament play. During their lunch break, which they insisted on calling their stream downtime, I overheard them discussing our efforts. They're totally doing the Dark Souls thing, Thompson mused while performing zero-gravity tricks with his yo-yo. You know, trying to make it super punishing and all. More like a bullet hell game with extra steps, Nova replied, sketching out complex dodge patterns on her datapad. The pattern density is getting pretty spicy. Either way, Mason added, the difficulty curve is way better than last week. They're really starting to get game design principles. That wasn't the worst of it. The other students had started learning from them. I discovered a group of Medusan scholars analyzing human, speedrunning documents to improve their quantum physics performance. A cluster of hive mind students had begun approaching tactical simulations using something called MMO raid strategies. Even the Crystalline Collective was discussing the application of fog of war mechanics to strategic planning. The humans had turned our entire student body into what they called gamers. The final straw came during our ultimate attempt to challenge them. We created a scenario that required perfect stillness and complete suppression of competitive instincts. Success demanded total inaction, the opposite of everything we had observed in human gaming behavior. "Oh nice, a stealth mission," Thompson whispered excitedly. "Time for some Metal Gear strategies." What followed was 3 hours of what they called optimal stealth strats, as they somehow turned complete inaction into an intense competition to see who could be the most AFK while still technically playing. That evening, as I reviewed the day's footage, Dean Varnine floated into my office, their photonic brain pulsing with an idea. "Perhaps," they suggested, "we have been approaching this backwards. Instead of trying to defeat their gaming mindset, we should be studying it. After all, they have accidentally created the most efficient learning system we've ever encountered." I was about to respond when an alert flashed across my neural interface. The humans had submitted a formal proposal to the Academy Board. They wanted to introduce something called achievements to our curriculum. And leaderboards. And perhaps most worryingly, something called a Battle Royale mode for our combat training. "They're just suggestions for increasing student engagement," Thompson explained when I called them to my office, still doing impossible tricks with that infernal yo-yo. "You know, basic gamification principles. Also, have you considered adding cosmetic rewards for completing advanced theoretical physics modules?" My spots shifted to a color that hadn't been seen since the great confusion of the Third Epoch. "Oh, and one more thing," he added with that familiar grin. "We think the quantum entanglement practical exam could really benefit from a battle pass system. With seasons. And maybe some rare emotes as rewards." Looking at my reflection in the quantum glass window, I realized my spots had given up and were now displaying what humans call a blue screen of death. They say the universe has a sense of humor. Today proved that hypothesis beyond any reasonable doubt. Just as we were reaching our breaking point with our human cadets' unconventional methods, a genuine crisis struck the Academy. One that would test whether their gamer logic could handle real-world consequences. It began during what should have been a routine maintenance cycle of our quantum core, the artificial star that powers our entire facility. A cascade failure in the containment field threatened to trigger a chain reaction that could have destroyed half the sector. I was in my office, reviewing the humans' latest proposal for adding seasonal events to our curriculum, when the alert sirens began blaring. "Warning, quantum core breach imminent. Containment failure in 47 minutes. This is not a simulation. Repeat, this is not a simulation." My spots turned ash-white as I rushed to the control center. The scene there was pure chaos. Our best quantum physicists were frantically trying to stabilize the core, but nothing was working. The containment field was collapsing in patterns that defied all known physics. That's when I heard it, that infuriatingly familiar sound of Thompson's yo-yo. "Yo, Prof," he called out, strolling into the control center with Nova and Mason. "We couldn't help but notice you've got a pretty epic raid boss situation developing here. This is not one of your games." Professor Stolez's crystalline form was vibrating with panic. "The quantum core is experiencing a 15-dimensional cascade failure." 15 dimensions. Mason's eyes lit up. Just like the bonus stage in Quantum Crisis Ultimate. "Nova, what's the field composition looking like?" Nova was already analyzing the holographic displays, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. "Classic bullet hell pattern. The quantum fluctuations are following a spiral Fibonacci sequence. It's basically Galaxy Guardian's final boss but with actual physics." "You can't possibly," I began, but Thompson cut me off. "Prof, remember how we kept telling you games prepared us for this stuff? Time to prove it." He pocketed his yo-yo for the first time since arriving at the Academy. "Mason, Nova, standard raid positions. What followed was 42 minutes of the most unorthodox quantum physics I've ever witnessed. They approached the crisis like what they called a raid boss fight. Mason took the role of what he termed main tank, directly interfacing with the core's containment systems to hold aggro from the quantum fluctuations. Nova became their DPS, precisely targeting critical nodes in the field matrix with controlled energy bursts. Thompson, surprisingly, chose what he called a support build, coordinating their efforts and maintaining what he termed buff uptime. Quantum spike coming in hot. Mason called out. Need a cleanse on the containment field. Got you covered. Thompson replied. Nova, that's your DPS window. Executing rotation. Nova's fingers blurred across the controls. Watch out for the bullet hell phase at 30% stability. They were treating the potential destruction of half a sector like some sort of coordinated dance. The most bizarre part. It was working. The core's stability is actually improving, Professor Stoll noted, their crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. But they're breaking every known law of quantum physics. No, they're breaking every known law of quantum physics with style, Dean Varnine corrected, their photonic brain pulsing with what seemed like amusement. Less talking, more DPS. Thompson shouted. This boss has a hard enrage timer. With just 3 minutes to spare, they stabilized the core. The containment field not only held, it was stronger than before. Somehow, they had turned a near catastrophe into what they called a world first clear. Woo! New speed run record. Thompson cheered, immediately pulling out his yo-yo again. Though technically since this was our first attempt, any time would have been a record. The parse logs on this are going to be insane, Nova grinned, already documenting their rotation for future reference. Pretty solid raid, Mason nodded. Though we could probably optimize the strat if we... Enough. I hadn't meant to shout, but my spots were cycling through colors faster than a quantum strobe. You just saved the Academy, possibly the entire sector, by treating a real crisis like one of your games. Do you have any idea what this means? That we need to implement a proper encounter journal? Thompson suggested. You know, to document boss mechanics for future attempts. Although, Nova added thoughtfully, we should probably add some achievement criteria. Maybe a special title for clearing it without wiping. And definitely need to fix that RNG on the quantum fluctuations, Mason noted. The pattern variance was way too high for competitive play. I was about to explain, in explicit detail, why this wasn't about games anymore, when Dean Varnine interrupted with an observation that made all three of my hearts skip a beat. The Void Hunters are approaching Centaur Prime, they announced, their photonic brain pulsing with concern. Long-range sensors detect a full invasion fleet. The Void Hunters. The galaxy's most notorious pirates, quantum raiders who had never been defeated in direct combat. And they were heading straight for us. Oh sweet. Thompson's eyes lit up. Is this the start of the seasonal event? My spots shifted to a shade of despair previously unknown to chromatic science. No, I replied, watching the invasion fleet approach on our sensors. This is what we call a worst-case scenario. Awesome, Mason grinned. We love those. Hey Nova, didn't you say you wanted to try that new build you theory crafted? Already running the numbers, she replied, pulling up tactical displays. Thompson, how do you feel about exploiting quantum physics for a zero-gravity boss fight? The yo-yo spun in complex patterns that somehow seemed to mock the laws of reality. I thought you'd never ask. As I watched them begin planning our defense using terms like aggro radius and ad phase management, I realized something profound. Perhaps the galaxy's greatest warriors weren't those who took war seriously, but those who had spent their lives treating it like a game. If anyone finds this recording, let it serve as testament to the day 3 human cadets redefined warfare using what they call pro-gamer moves. The Void Hunter's invasion fleet hangs above Centaur Prime like a quantum storm, and our human students are excited. This is literally perfect timing, Thompson declared, his yo-yo spinning in impossible patterns as we gathered in the war room. We just finished the tutorial stage with that quantum core crisis. Now it's time for the actual endgame content. The Academy's defensive council was in chaos. The Void Hunters had never been defeated, their quantum phase technology made conventional tactics useless. They could shift their ships through 15 dimensions at will, appearing and disappearing like cosmic ghosts. Our shields won't hold against their quantum torpedoes, Professor Thul's crystalline form was vibrating with fear. Their phase shift technology negates all known defense strategies. Phase shifting? Through 15 dimensions. Nova's eyes lit up. That's just like the final boss in Stellar Phantasm 7. Remember the speedrunning strat we developed for that? The one where you exploit the dimensional drift to create a quantum lock. Mason grinned. Thompson, you still remember the frame-perfect timing for that? Thompson's yo-yo suddenly stopped mid-spin, hanging impossibly still in space. Please. I still hold the world record for that skip. Before I could protest this absurd comparison between a video game and actual combat, they had taken over the Academy's defense systems. The next hour was filled with terminology that made my spot strobe in confusion. Okay, we need to modify the shield harmonics to clip through the quantum boundary, Mason explained while reconfiguring our entire defense grid. It's basically the same wall clip glitch from Quantum Quest, just with actual quantum physics. I'm setting up what we call an animation cancel with the dimensional stabilizers, Nova added, her fingers flying across multiple control panels. If we time it right, we can trap their ships between phase shifts. And I'm implementing a reverse spawn camping strategy using modified gravity wells, Thompson said, his yo-yo now moving in patterns that seemed to bend spacetime. Classic speedrunning tech. The Void Hunters struck at precisely 0300 hours. Their ships phased into reality like vengeful spirits, quantum torpedoes already launching. But instead of the expected devastation, something extraordinary happened. Phase 1 starting. Thompson called out. Nova, hit that frame-perfect shield mod now. The Academy's shields flickered in a pattern that should have been impossible, creating what the humans called iframes, moments of quantum invulnerability based on precise timing. Perfect. Mason shouted. Moving to Phase 2. Initiating quantum lock, now. The Void Hunters' ships suddenly found themselves trapped between dimensions, caught in what Nova called a physics exploit. Their infamous phase-shifting ability had become a prison. They're stuck in the animation. Thompson laughed. Time for the DPS phase. What followed was the most unorthodox battle in galactic history. Our human cadets turned space combat into what they called a boss rush speedrun, complete with damage phases, mechanic skips, and something they termed cheese strats. Watch this trick shot. Thompson's yo-yo suddenly released a pulse of quantum energy that phased through 17 dimensions, somehow hitting every Void Hunter ship simultaneously. Frame-perfect quantum ricochet. Nice crit. Nova called back, using our gravity generators in ways that defied physics. That's definitely making it into the highlight reel. Less talking, more DPS. Mason commanded while manipulating quantum fields like they were game physics. We need to finish this before they hit their enraged timer. The Void Hunters, faced with tactics that broke every rule of space combat, began to retreat. But our humans weren't done. Oh no you don't. Thompson grinned. You can't rage quit a PvP match. They had somehow turned our entire defense grid into what they called an arena battle system. The Void Hunters found themselves trapped in a series of quantum gravity wells, their phase shift technology useless against what Mason called anti-cheese mechanics. GGEZ. Thompson declared as the last Void Hunter ship surrendered. That's a world first clear with 0 wipes. Pretty sloppy execution though, Nova critiqued, already documenting their strategy. We could definitely optimize that for future runs. True, Mason nodded. But hey, first attempt clear is still pretty good. Should we go for a no-hit run next time? The Academy Council was speechless. The most feared pirates in the galaxy had been defeated by 3 cadets treating interstellar combat like a speedrunning competition. I believe, Dean Varnina's photonic brain pulsed thoughtfully, we need to seriously reconsider our understanding of combat training. Oh man, wait until you see our ideas for the PvP system. Thompson's eyes lit up. We're thinking ranked matches, competitive seasons, maybe some battle royale elements. And a proper tutorial system, Nova added. The new player experience needs work. Plus achievements, Mason suggested. Gotta have achievements. As I record this final entry, watching our human cadets excitedly design what they call a competitive meta for galactic defense, I've come to a profound realization: sometimes the most effective warriors aren't those who take war seriously, but those who can face the deadliest challenges with a player's mindset. The Galactic Defense Academy will never be the same. And perhaps that's exactly what we needed. Hey Prof. Thompson called out, interrupting my contemplation. We've been thinking, how do you feel about adding cosmetic ship skins as rewards for defeating space pirates? You know, for student engagement. My spots have officially given up and settled on a permanent shade of confused resignation. In the end, it turns out humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their technology, their bravery, or even their combat skills. It was their ability to turn everything, even the defense of the galaxy itself, into what they call a 100% completion run. And somehow, against all logic, it works.